Howdy folks, welcome back to Mingles with Jingles. This week we're starting off with that old favourite, Wanker of the Week. Kicking us off this week we have a case of mistaken identity. A pair of KV-1S's on this team get very upset there's a BT2 and a failed platoon on the team, and they immediately start lashing out at Platoon 1 for being a bunch of noobs. In a fit of righteous indignation they even go so far as to start demanding that the whole team reports Platoon 1 for unfair play. Platoon 1 are forced to suffer these indignities for quite some time, utterly bemused as to why they're being singled out for the attention of the two KV-1S drivers, until it finally occurs to them the BT2's not in Platoon 1, he's in Platoon 2. You can kind of tell by big, number 2 next to his name. It's a bit of a giveaway. The BT2, who has up until this point remained conspicuously quiet, chooses this moment to reveal that yes, he is in fact a retard, although at least he's not so retarded that he mistakes a Jagdpanzer IV for a BT2. Our next contender is this T110E3, who's decided that taking off half of that E50's health is the only suitable punishment for taking some of the paint off the side of his tank. The E50 doesn't retaliate, he just gets on with playing the game. T110E3 reloads and kills him anyway. Our next contender is a pair of douchebags in KV2s who are determined to grief the shit out of this SU-100 here on Haloof. Fortunately for the SU-100, well, first of all, they're so dazzlingly incompetent at griefing that one of them falls off the cliff himself. Luckily for the SU-100, he has Gudos from the Cirque 2 clan behind him in a Jagdtiger 88. Now Gudos does not want to do any team damage to this cockmuncher in the KV2 who does so rightfully deserve it. Instead he blows his tracks off, giving the SU-100 a chance to get out of this situation. Douchebag number 1 repairs his tracks, goes for the SU-100 again, Gudos blows his tracks off again. Very grateful SU-100, finally able to get himself out of a very tricky situation. But of course, douchebags are gonna be douchebags. But what do you suppose a pair of tier 6 cockmunchers are going to do to a top tier tank destroyer on their own team whose only crime was to frustrate their douchebaggery? Yep, they both put shots into him and then run away like the girly little bitches they are. Gee, I really hope 200,000 people don't suddenly start reporting these cocksuckers for unfair play every time they see them in the game. That would break my heart. But this week's number 1 Wanker of the Week was an incredibly easy decision to make. In this game, this flank has pretty much collapsed on Kamara, and Campios and his buddy, 2Cats 2000, are falling back in a desperate attempt to protect their option. 2Cats 2000 in the Easy 8 has fallen back into cover. He's giving covering fire to Campios in the T-34-85. By some miracle, Campios makes it back without dying. The two of them set up to defend their artillery. Don't worry, Artie, they're going to have to go through us to get to you. Oh, am I in your way, Artie? Don't worry, I'll just... Or, yeah, you could always use one of the tanks that fell back to defend you as a handy service to fire a high explosive shell into and suicide on. If you're the kind of dick cheese gobbler who can suck a golf ball clean through a garden hose, that is always an option. Well, I really should start off this week properly by thanking everybody for all the birthday presents that they sent me for my 44th birthday last week on the 10th of March. Apparently the word got out that I really like artillery, and you funny bastards sent me, well, you sent me enough Sexton 1s that I could probably build a Sexton 30 by now if I had to. Special mention also, by the way, to Laffy Labriel, the funny bastard, who sent me a premium aircraft in my favourite game, World of Warplanes. You're a bunch of funny bastards, aren't you? Look at that. Seriously though, thank you. I was running short of gold. I'm back up to 70,000 again now. While we're on the subject of birthdays, if today is your birthday, happy birthday. And today is the 17th of March, so that means Matt Larson, one of my subscribers, today is your birthday. Hope you have a good one. Next up, I wanted to talk about something that was brought to my attention in an email from a man called Ross Sharp, who's the Director of Engineering on a project that's known as the Peoples Mosquito. The Peoples Mosquito are a registered charity who've managed to get their hands on the wreckage of a crashed and buried de Havilland DH-98 Mosquito fighter bomber. Almost 8,000 of these beautiful aircraft were built and today around about 30 still exist, and only one of them is in flying condition. The one that flies was a Canadian-built Mosquito fighter bomber, which was restored and still flies in New Zealand. It's the only one that remains operational in the entire world. The Peoples Mosquito plan to bring that total to 2, and they want it back in British skies where it belongs. Just listen to that Rolls-Royce Merlin engine sing. How can you not want to hear that? I've always loved this aircraft. In my opinion, the de Havilland Mosquito fighter bomber was the best single bomber of the entire Second World War, of any nation. British, American, German, Russian. It kicked everybody's asses. Unlike your B-17s and your Avro Lancasters. Oh, listen to that engine. Unlike the B-17s and the Avro Lancasters, the Mosquitoes got to the target, hit the target, and then got back. They were devastatingly accurate, low-level fighter bombers, and they suffered a very, very low rate of loss because they were so incredibly quick. So if you have any interest whatsoever in helping to support this project, details in the video description, and I'll be paying close attention to the progress of this one over the course of the forthcoming months and years. I can't wait to see this thing fly. Well, my talking about my top 10 favourite games of all time in last week's Mingles with Jingles certainly seems to have stirred up a healthy dose of nostalgia for those golden gaming memories in the comments section. A number of people asked why World of Warcraft wasn't on the list, and yeah, I've been playing World of Warcraft for nearly 10 years. I don't know, I can only pick 10. Why wasn't Fallout 3 on the list? Yeah, Fallout 3 was great as well. I mean, my top 10's never going to be the same as everybody else's top 10. But it was really nice to see in the comments everybody talking about, you know, great gaming memories from fantastic computer video games that they've enjoyed over the years. And a couple of guys mentioned games that I'd completely forgotten about, which were fantastic, like No One Lives Forever 1 and 2, which was a sort of Austin Powers style spoof 1960s spy first-person shooter. Had a fantastic sense of humour. And when somebody mentioned No One Lives Forever, that prompted me to remember another fantastic game made by the same company before they did No One Lives Forever. Shogo, Mobile Armour Division. Anyone ever heard of that? Shogo was, well, it was kind of like a Japanese anime version inspired Mech Warrior. It definitely rode on the popularity of the Mech Warrior series, which were out at the time. This was around about 1998. And it's funny that I should remember this game now because Titanfall's just come out, and it's a very, very similar game. You would run around on foot and also inside these giant mechs, and it really just focused on blowing stuff up. And it was also really, really funny. Surprisingly, it still works very, very well on modern PCs, and if you can find a copy and get it working, I guarantee you'll be entertained. But all the comments about the games that people enjoyed the most naturally led to a couple of people asking the question, well, which 10 games do you think sucked the most? Now that's a tough one to answer, and not for the obvious reason. I mean, I've played plenty of mediocre games, plenty of disappointing sequels, but I can't really think of any games I've played that have been really, really diabolically bad. And I'm not saying there aren't some absolutely terrible games out there. Of course there are, but I tend to avoid them by reading up on them before I hand over the money. So I've managed to avoid most of the real stinkers over the course of the years. I've been caught out a couple of times though. And I've played a couple of games that, while not terrible overall, had some hilariously bad aspects to them. X Rebirth leaps to mind. X Rebirth was... I don't want to just write X Rebirth off, although it's probably going to be near the top of a lot of people's worst games ever. I thought it was a brave attempt, and it wasn't especially bad overall, except in one department, well, two departments. The voice acting and the dialogue, which was just so bad it was hilarious. I mean, seriously, game designers, stop being cheap. Hire a professional to do your voice acting and write your scripts. Seriously, it's not funny anymore. Well, it is funny, but not in a good way. The voice acting in X Rebirth was so bad. It genuinely sounded as if the script had been written by somebody in Germany and then translated into English by somebody in Kazakhstan who didn't speak very good German or English. It was just so... I'm not going to recommend... I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't so bad that you need to go out and buy a copy of X Rebirth to see for yourself. Just look it up on YouTube. Oh, man. And I don't know if you've noticed, but World of Tanks and War Thunder aren't exactly innocent of this kind of crime either. Have you ever looked at some of the in-game descriptions on the loading screens of the War Thunder maps? They're absolutely hilarious. And the World of Tanks website has dropped some real howlers in the past as well. And the thing is, I know that Gaijin have English PR people working for them. And I know that there are British people working at Wargaming Paris. It's not hard to fix the kind of mistakes that appear in their games and on their website. Just, hello, left hand, talk to right hand. Oh, but then we'd have nothing to laugh about, would we? Oh yeah, bad games. You know, I've played games that should have been terrible, but managed to work and be incredibly entertaining. Bulletstorm, I'm looking right at you. And I've played other games that should have been great, but were terrible, but I still kind of enjoyed anyway. Aliens, Colonial Marines, I'm looking at you. I've played games that were unquestionably great games, but I just sucked at them and had a real hard time with them, purely because I didn't have the patience to master them. You know, not because there was anything wrong with the games. Games like Armed Assault 2, Operation Flashpoint, EVE Online. And then you've got the games that everybody raved about, but I thought were utter dog shit. And the most famous example I can think of is Halo. And I know I'm going to get into trouble for this one, but I just did not understand what people saw in that game. Seriously, didn't have a clue. Maybe it was the multiplayer. I never played Halo multiplayer, so perhaps that's it. Perhaps Halo multiplayer was all different kinds of fun. And perhaps that's why I just didn't get it with Halo. But Halo single player was one of the biggest pieces of dog shit I have ever had the misfortune to spend money on. I've seen more imagination put into a washing detergent advertisement. Seriously, Halo single player went like this. You would run, drive or fly around an outdoors area getting shot at for a bit. Then you would come across a bunker. You would enter the bunker, and for the next 15 minutes you would walk along a corridor shooting at the same enemies over and over and over. Then you would come out of the corridor and into another open area where you would either walk, drive or fly around for a bit, getting shot at. Then you would come to another bunker. You would enter that bunker and walk along the same frickin' corridor for the next 15 minutes, shooting at the same enemies you did the first time. Repeat that for 14 or 15 hours, and that was Halo. It was so mind-bogglingly repetitive and boring. I just didn't get what all the fuss was about. It must have been the multiplayer. That's the only explanation I can think of. And maybe the sequels were better, I don't know. And I'm unlikely to ever find out, because the lack of imagination that went into the first Halo just ruined the series for me, and I never tried any of the others. But then of course you've got the kind of games that were shit. Everybody knows they were shit, and absolutely nobody ever tried to claim they were anything other than shit, except for the people who made them. And I think probably the most famous example of that was Daikatana. Daikatana was the brainchild of John Romero, and there was a time when John Romero could do no wrong. John Romero was most famous initially for working with id Software with John Carmack and Tom Hall, and these were the guys responsible for revolutionising the first-person shooter with games like Wolfenstein 3D and of course most famously Doom and Quake. Well, actually that's not strictly true. Romero and Hall left id Software after the success of Doom to form their own company, Ion Storm. John Carmack stayed at id Software and immediately produced another fantastic first-person shooter, Quake. John Romero and Tom Hall at Ion Storm announced a competitor to Quake, a game called Daikatana. It was supposed to come out within 7 months of Iron Storm being founded. Instead, it slipped 3 years after its intended release date. In the meantime, Iron Storm were in serious trouble. The first game they pushed out was a real-time strategy game called Dominion, Storm over Gift 3. Bizarre title. Unfortunately for Iron Storm, they released it on the same day that a company called Blizzard Entertainment released a demo for a little game called StarCraft. And, yeah, Dominion didn't do too well. Meanwhile, Tom Hall was busy at work on another game using the Quake engine called Anachronox. Now, Anachronox was actually bloody good, and it did get some very, very good reviews. Unfortunately, it was completely overshadowed and largely ignored thanks to the massive negative publicity that John Romero was generating by running ads for Daikatana that said things like, "John Romero is about to make you his bitch, suck it up." And everybody was just getting sick and tired of listening to the guy talk about what a fantastic game Daikatana was going to be, but there was still no game to show for it. Meanwhile, back at id Software, John Carmack just kept pushing out blockbuster after blockbuster game, and Daikatana still hadn't appeared. When it did eventually reach the shelves, boy did it suck. It was terrible. It was just buggy. It just tried too hard and failed on almost every level. The scale of the backlash that hit John Romero when he'd been spending years talking about how he was going to whip John Carmack and id Software's backsides with this amazing game he was writing, and then when it came out and it sucked as much as it did, it was just, it was so funny. You really had to be there. Unfortunately, it kind of killed the development company, and Tom Hall was working on some fantastic games. A lot of people remember Iron Storm for the utter disaster that was Daikatana, but they forget Iron Storm was also responsible for games like Deus Ex. Tom Hall did some amazing work when he was working at Iron Storm. Games like Anachronox and Deus Ex were fantastic games, but the company was finished after Daikatana. To this day, there's never been a gaming flop on the scale of John Romero's Daikatana. I mean, people will point to Duke Nukem Forever as an example of something on a similar scale, but it really wasn't. Duke Nukem Forever was in development for something like 15 years, and nobody, over that scale of time, nobody expected it to be any good. And when it wasn't any good, most people just went, "Oh right, yeah, it was shit, thought so," and didn't care. But Daikatana was in development for a long, long time, but not so long that everybody had given up on it. And the backlash against it when it came out, and it was as colossally bad as it was something that had to be seen to be believed. But I have been caught out more recently as well. In last year's Steam Summer Sale, I made the mistake, don't judge me, I fell for it. I made the mistake of buying the game formerly known as The War Z. A game that was so bad that the developer actually renamed it and relaunched it as Infestation Survivor Stories. And I saw a zombie survival horror game and I thought, it's only a couple of quid. Yeah, I'll buy that. Jesus. Oh, it was bad. It's just, you'd need to see it to believe it. It's actually available on Steam at the moment for 90% off. Trust me, even at 90% off, if you buy it, you're still going to feel cheated. It is terrible. Well, what about you lot? Let's see in the comments. What games have you guys played that absolutely sucked? Games that really should have been better. The kind of games that you would rather crawl 10 miles naked across broken glass with an erection. Right? You'd rather do that than spend a minute longer than necessary playing that game. Let me know in the comments. Let's have a laugh. A couple of questions from the comments of last week's Mingles with Jingles. This one is from Jumpseeker, and he wonders how long it's going to be before World of Tanks is going to need a complete overhaul. It's not that long since World of Tanks had a complete overhaul. Patch 8.5 introduced physics. If you look at my early World of Tanks videos, it doesn't just look like a completely different game to what we're playing now. It plays like a completely different game to what we're playing now. Introducing physics changed how you played every single map in the game. It really was just a huge update to the way the game played. And in the next couple of weeks, coming to a World of Tanks test server near you, patch 9.0, the next major change to World of Tanks. It's just around the corner. 9.0 is bringing HD graphics, HD tank models, independently modelled suspension for tanks, havoc physics, destructible buildings. It's going to be huge. And it's apparently coming in the next few weeks. It's going to be as big a change to World of Tanks as, well, possibly not as big a change to World of Tanks as patch 8.5. In 8.5 you really did have to forget everything that you knew about the World of Tanks maps and learn them all again from scratch. 9.0 isn't going to be quite that big a change on that kind of level, but there are still going to be big changes in the way that you play. Recently we've seen more destructible buildings added to the game. Almost every building on every map in the game is going to be destructible in patch 9.0, and the wreckage and the rubble from the buildings is going to have mass and inertia as well. You're going to be able to damage tanks by blowing up the building around them and watching the wreckage fall on the tank. There's big changes coming in patch 9.0, and it is quite literally just around the corner. Mr. Tog Tank wants to know, Jingles, do I think Wargaming should do a map that's just a city, like Cologne or Arnhem? There are city maps in the game. Himmelsdorf, the most obvious example. And there are other maps that have got a lot of buildings in them, like, Rugenberg. But unless you mean specifically modelling a map on Arnhem or on Cologne, there weren't really any tank battles fought in Arnhem. I mean, there were tanks that fought in Arnhem, but they were all German. There weren't any British tanks on the other side, so it wouldn't really be a logical choice for a city map. Cologne? Yeah, perhaps. But, you've got to ask yourself, the problem with the city maps currently in the game are that they're fantastic for heavy tanks, there are opportunities there for medium tanks, and they're pretty good for tank destroyers, but light tank drivers and artillery, not so much fun. And I think that's one of the reasons why, to this day, Himmelsdorf is the only 100% complete urban map in World of Tanks. It's because that it doesn't really work for every class of vehicle in the game, particularly artillery, but also light tanks. And Wargaming have also said that they want to try to make light tanks more relevant to a whole range of different maps on the game, and they're looking at ways of rebalancing light tanks to achieve that. And I don't think throwing more city maps in, exclusively city maps, is really part of that plan. Now, Wargaming are keeping their cards very close to their chest when it comes to what they're going to do to change light tanks in the game, but I'm pretty sure that throwing in more exclusively urban maps is definitely not compatible with whatever plans they have for rebalancing the light tank class. And I think that in view of the light tank rebalance, we're probably not going to see many more exclusively urban maps. More maps that have a mixture of urban and open landscape, yeah, sure, variety is good, but exclusively urban maps, probably not. I'll tell you what I would like to see though, some urban maps in War Thunder Ground Forces. Haven't seen any of those yet. Next up, it's a more serious subject this time. This is from one of my subscribers, and I'm going to keep his name secret to protect his identity, just in case any of the scumbags he's talking about also watch my videos. We'll call him Dave. Dave's only 13 years old, and he gets bullied a lot. He gets bullied so much that he's actually thought about hurting himself. This kid's only 13 years old. That is absolutely terrible. The one source of enjoyment in his young life is apparently watching my videos on YouTube. Now, it's normally at this point where I say I think it's absolutely great that you look forward to watching my videos, but it's definitely not great that watching my videos is the only thing you look forward to. There should be more to life than just listening to me blather on about computer games on the internet. But, that's the situation that this poor kid's in. He gets bullied at school, and the only thing he has to look forward to is when he gets home, he can go onto YouTube and watch videos from his favourite YouTubers. And the sad thing is, I'm sure he's not alone. I'm sure that he is not the only person watching this video who is being bullied and is going through exactly the same situation. And you know what? I got bullied at school too. Up until about the same age as you, I got bullied every day. I had no friends whatsoever. I was in exactly the same situation. And I'm sure a lot of people watching this video understand and sympathise and have been in exactly the same situation throughout their lives. Bullying is a huge problem, and not just at school. People get bullied at work. Vindictive bosses who bully their workers. You know, it's a huge problem in society. And yet, look at me now. I turned out all right. And Dave, trust me, you're going to turn out all right as well. And anybody else who's been in the same situation, you know, feel free to chip in the comments, because I'm sure young Dave's going to be reading the comments of this video. Getting bullied at an early stage in life is not your whole life. I know it feels like it at the time, but things change. You really don't have to feel like a victim all the time just because a bunch of arseholes at your school have such low self-esteem that the only way they can feel good about themselves is taking out their own lack of self-worth on you. People who do that, the problem is with them, not with you. I think almost everybody got bullied at school in one way or another. For some people, it's particularly bad. But it does not last forever. And just ask yourself this. 15 years from now, when you've got a great job, a nice house, a loving family, and the people who bullied you at school are still packing groceries at the checkout of the local supermarket, who's going to be the one having the last laugh? Just hang in there. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.